How's that? Does that work? Yeah. Alright, I got my bucket of thingies. Oh, my rock in my pocket. Wow. Oh, g'day guys, Tobini Yogini here. And this is going to be a fun one. This video this has been a mind bender for a little bit of time for me, to be honest. A little bit of time. And yeah, I cannot wait to jump into all of the goodness that is alluded to in the title. But first and foremost, you know what we're doing. All this is coming from sacred spirit, from country on country. So in order to respect our ancestors and everybody, oh, there's the rock, exactly, drop out of the pocket. In order to respect the ancestors, we must smoke. Now, the most purest form of that smoke, divine holiness, is our dear friend Yandi. And so I've brought out some, oh, fly. I've brought out some friends to say hello. This is my Yandi pipe that I use for ceremony. I made myself. It's a beautiful bit of wood, some beeswax, and good old Mother Nature, which is just incredible. Oh, how nice is that spring sound? Far out. When I came down, when it was like just torrential rain and we had the like first flood, the spring was just pumping. Thankfully, the bit of cement work that I did to like make the like part where we can collect water a little bit easier didn't wash away. Like, you know, my dad and my grandfather were like cement and concrete, like bricklayers and concreters. So like I know what I'm doing, and like I've seen a lot of it, and you know, this is the first time that I've like built anything like this, but not on this scale, and then to like withstand that water. Wow, it was just, yeah, it was really incredible. really incredible to see, to be honest. So I'm, yeah, really hyped. Don't get me wrong, there's some rocks that got pulled out that were part of the cement work, but no, nothing crazy. So I got to do some repairs over the coming days, but anyway. So yes, albeit like now the beautiful thing about using that Yandi pipe is, to be honest, I get to control the amount of smoke that I inhale a lot more than a joint. So I can use my lungs, and yeah, inherently I do smoke a little bit, but especially in ceremony, it kind of comes across more of like how you chuff on like a cigar, I guess. There's something in like what we can all relate to. That motion of like enjoying the flavors, but then letting all the smoke go for the ancestors, and then taking your spirit on that. Opposed to using it all for yourself. That's something that we get to play with nature, and that way you can start to create your own connection with having a plant that is more so something used for ceremony opposed to something that's over abused. Alright. So why I make such a big deal about spirit in this video is because so much of this entirely all of this obviously is led by the spirit quest, by the greater collective, by Tamzin as well. She's entirely like involved in, you know, in research and everything that we and I, you know, put onto these videos. So she could equally be beside me, you know, in this. However, she sometimes gets bored in mathematics and stuff, so I get the fun part of explaining all this. But no, it's so incredible to have a research partner that is just so like enthused with, you know, similar things to where obviously we're divine reflections of one another. So that's the beauty of it all, which is incredible. Which this kind of, so without further ado, I'm going to jump into this because this video is going to be jam-packed, to be honest, like super jam-packed. So much going on, coming through from everything. But in my last like couple of chit-chat chai videos, I've started to allude to the connection between like mathematics and divine creation, the architecture of the universe, how we can start to utilize the philosophy of nature to create and feel how we are supposed to feel in this environment as humans, and then start to transcend into our purest form, leading with our heart. And that's like, you know, obviously a very big statement, and, you know, there's so much depth to this, and that's the whole beauty and crux of this, is that like, hopefully this succinct understanding and demonstration of these really fundamental architecture questions that have been held as sacred secrets and kind of withheld as the knowledge, it's now time to start to unpack it and share it, because the collective is ready for it. And so because the collective's starting to get ready for it, and is ready for it, I have started a deep connection with like the elementals and the rocks and you know, everything in that world, because, you know, the rocks are, you know, more often than not very masculine in their energies, albeit there's healing stones and rocks that are, you know, fundamentally used in women's business as well. A lot of the rock entities can be, you know, masculine. So it's really nice that I have that honor and role to play as a conduit, and especially now more than ever, especially the feminine rocks, because they are coming from that feminine space, you know, albeit, yes, depending on what they speak to you. The feminine rocks that I find, I get to like carry and be the caretaker of until, you know, I bring them back to Tams, or if I feel inherent call towards them for something in a healing capacity, because they are linked to water. And a lot of my dreaming is also linked to water, and just where I find myself down by this sacred spring, I have an innate connection to that, and so it's something that I just had to follow intuitively. But first and foremost, you know, water and things like this are also, and rocks, you know, are very much men's and women's business. And this one especially that I'm about to present, I'll show some other angles and you know, cut and chop this, because I don't know how this camera is going to focus straight up. But this rock here in my hand, just so you can see in comparison to my palm, it literally fits in the palm of my hand, right? And why does it fit my palm of my hand like this very easily? Well, I call this like a talisman, or like a keystone, or like a stone to open something, right? That's what this shape means. Something like this. Now I have rocks that are very similar in shape like this, not exactly, but they take the same form, and they have a sacred geometrical message and code that has been inscribed, literally inscribed to really hard rock in a way that no technology of today's day and age can comprehend or understand. Now that rock is, albeit, a keystone to the heart. Now, how do I know it's a keystone to the heart? Well, that is a very, very great point. Now, this is where the research side of things and everything across the span of my life, because, you know, I feel like I've always been researching for something but I didn't know what that question was, you know? So like when I was at engineering school and studying robotics and like 3D printing and, you know, triangulation and all of this shit, like electrical current signals, like this crazy stuff that's really going on in the tech world right now, you know? Like I saw a path, I saw that, you know, trajectory as society. I'm like, dude, I'm just going to slot straight in because that's just where I feel inherently called to. But when I really sit with what technology means, like at the point you have, like technology is supposed to be something that enables you to unlock your ultimate potential. So like for me, connection or a phone or a camera or the internet is a tool for me to get the most out of connecting with humans, albeit I have psychic capacities and can, you know, send messages and feel and read minds and do all that stuff. The ability to just have, you know, whack on a camera and show something and do that is a tool to help something. So like if we start to program our mind and perceive something like all that, how can I see this rock as some form of tool to aid my spiritual growth? Because that's what the rocks and elements really represent. You know, we always, no matter what esoteric teachings or, you know, spiritual teachings or whatever, you know, you go to, they always, you know, use analogies of the environment. Now here in Australia, you know, there's a lot of incredible information, like true information that is now actually coming out about Australia being where the first peoples come from and our DNA as a species come from. And in and amongst that, hey Lace, you know, there's a beautiful role that I get to play as, you know, a man that has, indigenous, you know, can bang your blood, and also, you know, really crazy Irish blood, and, you know, a little bit of, you know, French that's come in there along the ways when I've gone back and seen things. And it's just, you know, having that connection, you really get to start to tap into your own DNA and activate it. And so I'm saying all of these things in prelude to where this rock truly goes, right? Because this is something that has been aligned with my own spiritual growth, with my own decoding my own DNA to then activate me into my highest formula, and then download the true light codes that are there at the Kashi, that is just ready to be tapped into everybody. And it's just through these fundamental understandings of like retraining how we perceive the world, because all of us, you know, plus minus that couple of percent that maybe got homeschooled or didn't go to school, all of us in the Western world have sat in like a classroom and just completely obliterated with indoctrination. But albeit the information being there, but it was just set up in the wrong manner for us to always have these questions that never get answered. And so because of that, I really think that I've always been studying for something I do know the question to. But once you go, you know, start to have this activation of your own DNA, the sense of divinity within your own purpose really starts to transpire. And through this, I got to see how I could get back into that space where I found myself really exploring as a young kid. Like the moment before I got like, you know, I felt making money become more important because of a family stress or whatever, something that was so small that took you just away from that moment to then start to think about other things, because we're empathetic beings. So you start to worry about your parents, you start to worry about your siblings, you start to worry about your friends, you start to care, you start to love, you start to, you know, try to just be this pure love being in the world, but has been set up in the wrong manner. And then all of a sudden you get tired of that and you're like, well, fuck this, it's not working out. And then you feel like it's a little bit too late. But I don't think that's like the way that we should just all think, because ultimately, I just think if we start to share the sacred truths that have been, you know, stored away, and that's why I say the study element of this has really been in tandem with Tams, because she really gets into the nitty-gritty of it. I really get to see the correlations and use like quantitative and qualitative understandings and capacities to like bring stuff together, and then we get to create a picture. And so what the picture that we've been creating recently is something that is fundamentally really connected to both of us, just by our, you know, our own personal context. But that all being said, this rock, I'll get back to it, this rock, right? So what does this rock represent? Well, the first face of this rock has two lines that project a particular angle. Now that angle aligns to 33 degrees. Now, 33 degrees. Wow, what does that represent? Well, a number of things. Without going into like too much information, because I can dart everywhere across the world for this one. But I'm gonna bring it back to, you know, ultimately a truth that I have felt and come to know through the last like 4 or 5 years of deep sense of research and awakening into activating into like the highest timeline I can literally perceive for myself and humanity. The question of like where the human species, where we come from and why we are here, has been like the fundamental one for that. Now, through that, it led me back to connecting with my own blood and like lineage, because that's the only place that you really get to look, right? You know, I look at any big war across the world, it's being fought over blood, the crown, any form of monarch, it's to hold a purity of bloodline. So having the blood is something that like the world has like kept to be true as like something that's pure. And, you know, obviously we see this through indigenous cultures, especially in Australia. So the initiation process to spill blood for country, for an element, for a spirit, is a highly sacred ritual. Because, you know, in a sense, you're showing what that truly means to you. Like, you know, when we say, oh, like, I'll take a bullet for a loved one, like, yeah, would you cut yourself willingly to spill blood in like grace to your mother of how much she truly means to you? Like, are you willing to go to that length to show how much you actually value what she means to you in your life? And so when I see a rock that's been cut like this, to the effort and energy that is there to get that done, to showcase some message that can be held through the tests of time and millennia, because this stone goes back to culture and technology that precedes anything that we can even just comprehend in the current world, right? And so that rock has a dreaming yarn attached to it, and that dreaming yarn, there you go, the spirits. That's one of the birds that you've got to call out to sometimes. The dreaming yarn attached to this story basically says how we, as an entire species on this planet, started in the west coast of Australia and migrated via the 33 degree to the east coast of Australia, landing ourselves in Darug country, commonly now known as a place called Goss Ford or God's Ford. And that is basically where all the tribal and all the DNA started from here as the human species as we now know it. So it basically says that the outer Africa theory is wrong and Australia is the start of the human population on the entire globe, period. Now, Billy Carson is starting to tap into the out of Australia theory by, you know, it's actually shining light onto the researchers that are doing the nitty-gritty work in there. So go over there, give that love. We got to get this out to more people, obviously. I'll put a little banger here. How about that? So, you know, I saw that, right? I saw that having these rocks. Tamzin and I have had this rock for about 18 months now, and we've been on a mission to work out what this means. And a number of rocks that are sat behind me that basically, some of them are like just things that completely have to rewrite history. I'm not even going to show them on camera yet. I don't even want to do that. That I can't do yet. This rock I've sat with for 12 to 18 months. And that's why I know now I can be a clear conduit. I can showcase what this means. I can do it justice by exploring this because I've fucking given it time, man. Tamzin and I have like, yeah, we've done our work in debunking what that means. And so what this does mean, right? What this means is we have the human species migrating to the east coast of Australia, where we had our first colony. And then once that colony formed, and it got too big and a few, you know, DNA blood issues starting to occur, then they started to segregate the population across Australia, starting up in Bundjalung country, then going down, you know, towards Gimbangia and so on and so forth, right? And they go up to Bundjalung country because that's where, you know, that's the eastmost point. It gets the sun the first. It's a very significant point on in Australia, let alone across the globe. I'll just leave that there. And because of all of that, we have a situation now where we start to see the true unraveling of the history of the human species. But it's been something that's been covered up so much, and the answers are there. And so what else does this rock possess? Well, it possesses a few things. It possesses a marking that is a crosshatch together. So this, like a symbol like this, obviously that is something that we are all, you know, have seen, understand and feel. We also have these two curved lines that are fucking incredible on the back, that are so straight and so curved, one being bigger, one being smaller. Now when I look at this rock and I see that it has the 33-degree latitude, latitude, longitude, I can't remember, I'm having a mind blank now, the one going across, I start to put the pieces together. But what else is so significant about this 33? This number? Well, through my research, you know, you come to know that this number is very important to the Freemasons, to Sir Francis Bacon, to any secret society of enlightenment. But where I see these secret societies kind of falling short right now is they're like knowing how, they know the information. We are all starting to know the information, but how do we embody it? How do we become it? How do we activate it within ourselves to then own that as a truth and then realize our full potential as a species? So that's why I go to a rock like this for those answers, because fuck man, it's got to be somewhere here, but it's been tried to hidden up. So the ancestors knew that. They did, well, I'm whacking in a rock. So what that rock also says to me is that number. And now this is where the next piece of this yarn goes, all right? And it's about starting to dissect those two curves on the back of that piece to make the next link of the story. Because, you know, I can see that 33-degree mark, and I can research and start to piece together. And also I've heard the yarn, I know the story of the Pleiades. I've been told this, I've been shown this. So for me to then start to piece it together, it makes sense to my own sense of truth that I've known as a yarn. I've got beautiful poems written about this. I might even share one through the next stage of this video just to break it all up. Read a little bit of a poem. But I am gonna pause this and then put it back on because it's got like a weird 30-minute banger. So I'm just gonna do this now. All right, we're back on. So, all right, the next part of this decoding of this magic sacred rock to show what the hell's going on in the world. All right, I'm gonna use a stone. Oh, here we go. Here's one I can show because it has been used for similar demonstrations over time. I'll get a bit of. Very good. All right. So I'll draw something. Got a bit of orc. Got a rock. Alright, so we got these two curves, right? We got a bigger one and we have a smaller one. We got a bigger one and a smaller one, right? But they're both the same. They've both got the exact same curve. So what does that tell me? Well, when you start to learn the yarn of our, you know, creation story from the Indigenous Australian perspective, you really get to see the sense of two sisters coming through. So that curve right there are Pleiadian sisters, right? You got the bigger one and the smaller one. But that symbol, that curve, is a divine curve. So that symbol and curve mathematically has been used across the globe in the Western world, also through Greek mythology. Now, when I first saw those curves, to be honest, my mind immediately thought the Nike swoosh, right? They're on the exact same trajectory as the Nike swoosh these days. But when I hear the yarn, I know that that's the older and the younger Pleiadian sisters that migrated via the 33 degree from the west coast to the east coast to start breeding, to create the human species as we now know it. But how did I become to know that? Well, obviously I know the yarn, but how do I link that mathematically to those two curves? Now, mathematically, those two curves in Greek mythology are used as they on the angel wings, right? That curve is on the angel wings, and it's said to be the daughter of Zeus, the most gorgeous woman on this planet. Now, Tammy and I got a bit of Pleiadian blood, and she is the most gorgeous woman on this planet from my perspective, obviously. Bit biased, but I fucking think she's up there. Now, Pleiadian women, beautiful, I would imagine, seeing if I ever do meet a pure-blood Pleiadian in the flesh, which is going to happen very soon. Although being telepathically right now, the in the flesh is all coming for us, so be prepared. But I saw that and went, all right, Greek mythology through the Nike swoosh, because it represents Zeus's beautiful daughter, the most beautiful daughter, and she was an angel that came down here when in that story. Now, wow, we have this story again, this angel coming down here. Now we know, or I just said, the Pleiadian women came down here, the younger and the older, with the Indigenous tell us this, and it's written in this stone. And then we see it through history, all based on that number. But how do I know that that number's now linked to us like our blood, to breed, our blood, DNA, right? How do I know all of that? Well, I know that because of other mathematics, because of other things written on this rock, and then things that then I've come to know to be true through my own research based around the mathematical phenomena that is the 33 degree. So we have these two lines here that represents the two Pleiadian sisters that are coming. But that there, why is that mathematically actually linked to the heart, to our blood, to the pumping blood, to activating our blood? Because that is the $1 million question, right? That is the $1 million question. Well, on this rock, we also have this little marking underneath, right? That is a cross. And that little cross is something that's so beautiful, right? That there is the crossing of the DNA, the crossing, the merging of two. Something like this, hey? We've all seen something like that before in our life. But what does that mean? Well, that's actually the inverse of, I think, sine or cosine graft, right? That symbol. But what else is that? Well, that's a DNA curve. But what else is DNA? Okay, well, we'll go on a bit of a yarn here. So the next bit of this yarn is the heart, right? So when we see the heart beat, when we actually see that heartbeat, it creates a wave formation that is literally connected to the sine wave, right? But the sine wave and the cosine wave look exactly the same, except for they're just off by a degree. Now, when you graph a sine and a cosine, oh, you didn't. I didn't know I did. When we graph the sine and the cosine wave, this is what we get. We get one. Oh, this is what we get. We get two curves, ladies and gentlemen, two waves that look like that. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen DNA, but that is exactly the formation of DNA. The DNA waves are two sine waves that are offset by 1 degree of magnitude, forming them to be cosine and sine waves that I can draw on a rock with this bit of ochre. Okay? Now, that cross there is basically what that represents. Now, how does that link then to the Pleiadian sisters? Well, that's the next beautiful part of mathematics. So when we graph the heart blip on a graph, that is the exact magnitude and curves. Regular heartbeat takes on the exact formation of that curve. So if you've ever seen a heart that's been on check, beep, beep. I got my heart checked out a lot when I was a kid because I was running heaps, and I've actually got like a larger heart than normal. It's very strong, very healthy walls. And well, you know, I had my heart checked out a fair bit. And I've got a really strong, healthy heart, and so I saw that wave formation. It just, you know, it's heartbeat, it's rhythm, it's function as a constant pulse and a flow. You know, I feel it down in my spiritual, you know, yarns and feelings and meditations. There's a flow, there's a pulse. And then we also have a pulse. And then when we die, we don't have that pulse. So we know that this pulse thing's connected. But when we start to graph this pulse thing, we see it have a direct correlation between the heart functionality and the sine wave. But when we then graph the sine and the cosine wave, we get the spiral formation of our DNA. So what that says is that the code of our DNA is unlocked and cracked through our own blood. So when we follow our own blood back, we then understand the truth of what we really are. And what that really is we come from the 33 degree. So, how is it all linked? How is that line linked? Well, that line, that beat of the heart mathematically transpires and correlates exactly to that. I can literally prove that. I'll maybe put something on here that's just a little bit more clear than the ochre on a rock, and we'll go from there. But we start to see the cosine and the sine wave have this order of magnitude off. Now, what does that then also say? Well, that we also then know that the order of magnitude, when we graph cosine and sine wave, we start to see a phenomena. What we start to see, let me just, oh, I've actually got paper down here. I can draw this a bit better. All right, let me just do that too. All right, so now what we have is we have that's what I'm talking about. We have these two waves that are offset, and they're a sine and a cosine wave. Now the heart is connected to the sine wave, the beat of it, so we know that the motion of is connected to the heartbeat. But we also know that there's two waves connected, and we also know that the heart's connected to an electromagnetic connection. So that's only showcasing, that beat there is only showcasing one element, right, of the pulsating functionality. When we have two elements, we actually have two corresponding oversides, but one's electronic, one's magnetic. And that is what's represented by the sine and the cosine wave. Because when we graph the inverse correlation, we see that wave formation of the heartbeat and then this cosine and sine correlation between the hearts having an electronic and magnetic connection pulsating through it, that creates something that resembles how our DNA exactly shapes. Well, there's got to be a link there, and it's obviously showcasing through its mathematics. So what else happens when we start to explore that? Well, what we see is that when we start to graph the inverse of those two, we have something that looks like this. We start to see crossover patterns form. And now they're sacred patterns that are seen throughout the universe and through symbology and all of these things. But what they then link to is saying that one of them has a functionality connected to a linear time scale of 0 to infinity, and one of them is linked to the circular or degree relationship that is about the center point, going from 0 to 360. So then we start to see, well, there's a correlation between this linearity of our life and then the circleness of it that is represented through the electronic and magnetic polarities, components of the heart that pumps our blood. So we know that then the electromagnetic spectrum is where we need to go, which is also where light is held, so where everything is held onto, right? And so that's why they say that, you know, go towards the light, that's God, but they just whack that label onto it. But the light is in going back to that beating place that is the ever-nourishing place that everything is birthed from. But what is that? Well, how do we know what that truly is? Well, this is the interesting part when we start to analyze that graph. What starts first? Well, one of those waves is up and one of those waves is at a 0 point. So when we start to look at that, we can start to see what's going on. And we know that everything comes from that magnetic place of nothingness. That's what the Black Madonna Spring says. There's always that energy moving through the night, even though when we don't see it or feel it. So that symbology is always there. So that magnetic potential from the being in the nothing is the inverse of the light, of the linear formation that we see the light in the third dimension. And so what does that mean? Well, what that truly means is that actually the light that we're seeing and feeling and being and taking up has an inverse side. That inverse side is completely, entirely and utterly important, because that's the side that actually kickstarts your heartbeat, that sets your heartbeat. So if you start meditating and getting into that space of Zen and calming down your heart and controlling your breath and going back to the oneness, the first thing you do, that ripples out through your day, because you're literally connecting into that wave formation. And then that wave formation can just get hard coded into your body. So when we start to breathe and pump our hearts the way that they're supposed to, the blood flows, which then activates us. But we can only do that from a loving place. We have to activate and love our heart and understand what that means. And that's what that rock represents. Because once we understand as a species that we all come from the same place, regardless of our skin color, because fuck man, I'm white as. But I was speaking to bloody an elder Wendy from a different country, but she was up visiting because her brother had passed away. And so we got yarning, right? And she just started laughing. She goes, I got my granddaughter about the same age as you. And she's just laughs at me and she goes, and you're blacker than her. And she's bloody full blood. So this idea of skin color just needs to be eradicated from society, because the fundamentals of the inverse and verse of light and dark, of whatever, we play on that spectrum, and that's something that to be celebrated, because that is the uniqueness of the human experience. Because once we unlock this, we're all coming from the same source, so we need to be our individual selves to activate our heart. The only way that we activate our heart is by knowing what we truly are in this soul incarnation. And for me, it's being down here by the spring, you know, talking about rocks. But for other people, that might be something different. But this sparks me. This gives me so much joy and pleasure. So much so that I, you know, want to make videos about it. But other people love dancing. I love painting too. We are all this multicolored being. We are all this everything. And we need to start embodying it. And so obviously we know that there's been an age of war and the stars are now showing that we're coming out of it. But we need to start taking change. And by understanding this history that we all come from the same place and that we've been getting told a lie from all the institutions, whether it be the churches or, you know, schooling, whatever. When we start to really embody this information, and the indigenous, they don't fight. They don't fight. They don't fight. They might fight, but no one dies. And if they... No one dies, man. No, it just doesn't happen in culture. It just doesn't happen. Well, how? Because we're from the same place. We're from the stars. We're here to live in divinity. It's not anything woo-woo. It's literally the facts. Written out. Coded into stones that can stand the test of time. Now this heart and wave formation, right? So we graph the heart. And that's the beat that it takes. But I don't know if anyone else knows electricity. That's just what an AC current constantly looks like, right? So if we tap into that, we know that there's a magnetic flow out there that we can always tap into. And that's where understanding where we truly come from that beautiful feminine essence, from those beautiful Pleiadian sisters that were represented by those sacred ticks, as the holiness is something just so incredible, because that activates you. You stare at that and you go, that's so beautiful. Well, what other way to represent beauty of a divine creature to have divine architecture written into the code of the universe that represents a line in the third dimensional feedback of that linear reality, as we then transpire from our oneness, which is our magnetic resonance, which is where our heartbeat first comes from. And so if we can really tap into that oneness that is magnetism and control our heart and be with it and come from that place always, well, wow, what actually happens in the world? I see what happens in my own life when I start to transpire from that place. And so this is my mission, to start inspiring. So yeah, there's a lot of yarn here. There's a lot of links. There's a lot of bits and pieces. There's a lot of other lines and angles on this rock that come along in and amongst that. But yeah, right there, we just need to start to understand where we're going right now, because how we're working as a collective just isn't. It's not working. We know that. The aliens have been telling me that. The rocks have been telling me that. The hairy men have been telling me that have been providing me with the rocks. That's a whole other story. But yeah, they've been the keepers of these rocks, and they've been just been waiting to hear them get called out and activated. They have been. So here we are. If you have any questions, comments or queries, please leave them in the sections below. Yeah, look, anything else that I just need to look over? This is a healthy heartbeat. The key is a healthy heartbeat. That's the one thing right now. We need to get our heartbeat healthy. And my transmission the other day was about the blood, which is the waters, which is that, and then the sacred feminine, which is that negative flow or that magnetism that is the waters moving overnight that culminates and stirs with the ancestors. That symbology all starts to link into a story that's literally connected to these rocks coming across from the stars, being pleiadians, all of these things that are now coming out as truth, but they're written here. They're fundamental fact, and the evidence is here. It's unequivocally. So we need to start embodying what this truth truly means. And what that actually means is that we are a consciousness. We are a collective. Period. I've got other mathematics that we can talk about. Fuck, there'll be one right now. Let's just do it. The summation of the human consciousness. Let's look at that. So when we talk about summation, what does that mean? We can go from 0 to infinity. That's how we can start to play around with what the potential looks like in this world. So summation is something that's written that looks like that, right? But what does that truly mean? Well, we know that there's a sense of being and not being. But in and amongst that, and then there's the vessel that takes place. So that vessel can be the human experience. So we will denote that as a character. The Greeks used to use alpha or whatever. I'll just use a symbol. I'll draw a stick man, make it even simpler. So now I've got two symbols. I got a crazy M on the side and I got a man. Wow, alright, fuck, how else? How more simple can we make this? So what does that mean? So if I'm examining the human species and we know that there's a sense of being or aliveness and a not aliveness, that has to be something in of itself that is different to then the human experience. So we got the human body, which is a vessel, and we all are different, and that's a variable. So we got that as a variable, which is represented by the stick figure. But what's our constant? In and amongst doing a summation, we have to have a constant, we know that. Well, the constant, ladies and gentlemen, is consciousness. So let's represent that as an infinity sign. Not to confuse the situation, but we are just this looping consciousness. So what does that say to me? We are the collective consciousness, the summation of the human experience of all the beings Alright, so there we go, look at that. What does that say? Well, we got this crazy M thing that I drew, and that basically says from humans when they were 0 up to when humans are infinity, and we're just, you know, we've got a couple billion now, so we'll keep going up to infinity. What happens? Well, there's something that always happens. There's a sense of being and not being. That's denoted by the sense being in the vessel, which is our consciousness, is represented by the infinity sign, times by the human, they combine with the human vessel, and when we add them all together, we get the collective. So we're here to be our individual self, so we all got to start learning what our truth is, and the only way to unlock our truth is through our heart, and then we get to activate our sense of oneness, and then we realize that we're the collective, so then we're all going to stop fighting. So let's stop fucking fighting and love one another. The hippies were right, follow them, listen to them. Look after yourself, look after your parents and your waters and shit like that. Let fucking blood flow and water flow and see how it all goes, but we're all going to be right if you activate your heart. Respect Mother Nature. Understand that she's feminine. Man, stop fucking... Just get over yourself. You came from a pussy. You came from a vagina. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it all how it is. So women were first. You came out of one, so they had to come first. Let's just not overcomplicate it, period. The earth is our mother. Let's start respecting her. Let's start respecting one another and understanding that we all come from the one place. And that's holy. That's from the stars. And they're coming back. So I hope this video can show you how that number one, we're all a collective consciousness. That collective consciousness all comes from one place. We can tap into that. But also we need to be our human experience and we need to embody it to entirety. So much so that we radiate with our hearts forward and be one with where we truly are in this world. Know what we are, be proud of who we are. Start to activate our DNA and what we truly have come here to be, because that is pure and divine. Drink beautiful water, be connected with one another, love yourself, speak to the birds, talk to the plants, put your feet on the earth, can speak to the rocks if they speak to you. And it's time for me to call it and have a final smoking ceremony to cleanse this, because this has been a transmission. Thank you all for listening and being a part of this. It's a big, long video, yeah, so, you know, take it all in. But this is the mathematical underpinnings that are held and transpire within this rock that has been around for a very, very long time here in Australia. And is created through ancient technology that we can only dream of. Well, that's right, it's coming back. Alright, that all being said, I love you so much because you are me and I am you, but we are individually different. And we need to start accepting that, owning that, and supporting one another, because we're so much similar than what we really know. And once we just get over the bullshit of the illusionary experience that is only the third dimension, we get to become one. Oh man. Alright, I'll do a teaser for next rock video. If you make it this far, this is what we might talk about next time. Oh, what? It's even, oh, that's elusive.